Hello.
Okay, so what are you saying about my Zoom?
Executive Director and founder of Access California Services. She will be joined with Sheikh Yasser Fazaga, licensed mental health counselor, family and marriage therapist, as well as the mental health advisor here at Access California Services. Welcome to you both.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to welcome you all to our third annual Peace of Mind Conference. While we wish we could have been with you all in person, but this pandemic definitely changed the way we all do our work. But I am thrilled we can do this virtually, and for all, we have to stay safe and healthy. This conference is very dear to my heart. For many reasons, mental health is such an important topic. We must engage. In fact, it was many personal issues that I went through that I was going through a difficult time in my life that gave me the vision to establish Access California Services. I really need someone at that time that I can speak and so they can understand me and my culture, my language, my background. And at that time, I could not find anyone who can help me. I realized we need a culturally sensitive services so we can provide services to our community, the Middle Eastern, the Arab, the Muslim community, and place where we can offer many services, including mental health. Since this time, I have been an advocate for services, including mental health, to make sure our services and our voice is heard, and we need to meet the needs of our community. Establishing the mental health department, it was a great vision, but let me tell you how it did happen. When Sheikh Yasser approached me, and because he needed to do some hours to complete his hours in counseling, and we did not have anything that we can be offer, I listened, and we said, let's do it together. And we did, right, Sheikh Yasser? Yes. So through his love to and expertise of mental health, we helped make this department flourish and grow. And since 2004, we've been doing great work for our community. And for the first time, Orange County and Access California become together to provide a culturally sensitive, competent counseling services and mental health education for our community. Sheikh Yasser was also a key contributor to this, establishing this conference where it was Sheikh Yasser and myself who took the idea to meet with the county healthcare agency to let them know about what our community, they're going through after the travel ban, because we work with immigrant community and refugees. So, and they listened to us and they sponsored this conference. We start doing, putting together the ideas, but because we don't have the experience of putting conference together, we were just talking among our staff how we can be able to provide and do a conference for mental health. So the first person came to our mind is Dr. Marwa Azab, who is also the chairperson of this conference. When I approached Dr. Marwa Azab and I talked to her about doing a conference for our community, she was really excited, and because of her expertise, because of her knowledge and her background and the love for the community, the love of mental health, she accepted. And thank you very much, Dr. Marwa Azab, for leading us. And this is the third year that she's leading us to have this conference. And the Peace of Mind, it's just a critical event for our community. And we need to make sure that we continue. And I am honored to have Dr. Clayton Chow, who is the director of the Orange County Healthcare Agency and special friend to AccessCal and me personally, who will joining us today and to set the tone for our event. Dr. Chow's commitment to mental health and the stigma reduction is uncounted. Dr. Chow dedicated to ensuring all communities of all colors, all ethnicities, all races, that they are included in the mental health conversation. And Dr. Chow, and more importantly, have equal access to resources. That's his passion. Dr. Chow has been such a great support in helping AccessCal access more mental health resources and for our community. He's here with us today, and we are honored to have him. And he helped AccessCal to inviting us and introducing us to more resources and more funders, and to include AccessCal in every aspect for the mental health. Thank you very much, Dr. Chow, for being here, and we're honored. And I can see on this screen, Dr. Bhavana is the director of the MHSA. Actually, she's with us, and she helped flourish this conference. Thank you very much, Dr. Bhavana, for being with us. And without your support, really, we could not do this conference. And I am so grateful for our community support for this conference. I want to do a quick shout on our dedicated sponsors and endorsers. Without them, we could not do this conference. A special thanks to our funders, Orange County Healthcare Agency, our sponsors, MHSA Proposition 63, Be Well, Stigma Free OC, Each Mind Matter, Hoag Hospital, Sisters of St. Joseph Healthcare Foundation, Cal Optima, and Olive Community Services. Our endorsers are Islamic Shura Council of Southern California, Muslim Public Affairs Council, Mecca, Omid, Islamic Center of Irvine, Islamic Institute of Orange County Islamic Foundation, Islamic Society of Orange County, Council on American Islamic Relations, Shia Muslim Council, Muslim American Society, LA, Bayan Claremont, International College Healthcare Initiative, Sabil, Refugee Forum of Orange County, Uplift Charity, and Latino Muslim Unity. Thank you all for making this conference successful. And now I ask Dr. Marwa Azab to lead us with this conference. Thank you very much.
Right.
I am actually going to jump in, Dr. Azab, if that is okay with you. But wherever you are, whatever time it may be, a big assalamu alaikum, peace be with you, to you and your loved ones. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. We are happy that you have joined us, and we absolutely love being with you here this morning, at least for us. Not sure where the people from Istanbul or the people from Egypt, probably good evening to you over there. But it has been a pleasure, Nahla, working with you. This has been a beautiful, beautiful success story here at Access California. And as we say every week in our Mindful Wednesday programs, we are committed to doing 4 things. And that is to fight the stigma regarding mental health issues. We want to educate the public because ignorance breeds fear. And the more people are afraid of mental health related issues, I think the more fearful we become. And number 3, we also like to support those who are going through mental health related issues as well as their loved ones. And number 4, something that we are absolutely very appreciative of and we are really dedicated to, and that is to create programs and promote policies that will help people who are going through mental health related problems for them and for their loved ones as well. And I think that Access Cal has been really, really doing a great job in this field. And we are very grateful, like Nahla said, to Dr. Chow, the agency, in Orange County, and the sponsors that Nahla spoke about. Very grateful for your support and really look forward to further cooperation and collaboration along with you. And Dr. Chow, it's a pleasure having you with us. And Dr. Bovina, thank you again for joining us. And of course, to all the people who are out there. And it also gives me great pleasure that to introduce our chair for this year, Dr. Marwa Azab. I've had the pleasure of hearing her numerous places. A very, very elaborate resume, just going to give you snippets of it. Dr. Azab is currently teaching for the psychology department at Cal State University, Long Beach. That's a school that I went to, by the way, so good choice, Dr. Azab. In the past, she has also taught at UC Irvine. My sisters went to UC Irvine, so that's good two choices for you, Dr. Azab, mashallah, tabarakallah. And she has her PhD in neuroscience. She does write for Psychology Today, and she has a blog called Neuroscience in Everyday Life. She's spoken in the United States, Canada, and Singapore. She has delivered TED Talks all over the place, and she has been also on a documentary, Uncertainty on COVID. She's also been listed by VirgoWomen.com. Like, really inspirational, and absolutely a pleasure to have you with us, Dr. Azab. And thank you for doing what you do. And it is a delight and a pleasure to have you. Dr. Azab, welcome to the program, and you are our chair. So I'm giving you a big round of applause on behalf of our viewers. So welcome, Dr. Azab.
Oh, thanks for that very warm introduction. So good morning and welcome to Peace of Mind 2020. I want to say that this morning, I am full of gratitude for serving my community and working with the competent, diligent Access California team. I'm full of gratitude because of all the sponsors and endorsers and you who believe in the importance of such work. I am so honored to chair the Peace of Mind Conference for the third year in a row. We have been blessed that we've received multiple positive, rewarding feedback in the past years from hundreds of attendees. We carefully select questions that our community wants answers to. Our community is too rich, too diverse, too unique. We need to establish ourselves as a community with its heritages, features, unique struggles. At times, we express even physical and psychological issues very differently. That ought to be recognized. The conference gives a voice to our evolving community. The conference clearly and loudly says our struggles are unique, our needs have been overlooked. But at the same time, the conference clearly demonstrates our community's successful integration into the beautiful American mosaic and highlights our contributions. I am confident that you will enjoy and benefit from today's program, a program sculpted specifically for you. Please, please, please do not forget to fill out the surveys so we can continue to serve you in the best way possible. I am also extremely honored today to introduce Dr. Clayton, and a bit intimidated, so I'll try to do my best. So Dr. Clayton Chu, let's go here. So Dr. Clayton Chu is the director of the Orange County Care Agency and the county health officer. His past positions include Regional Executive Medical Director, Southern California Region Providence Health System, and Senior Medical Director for Health Services at LA Care Health Plan. He was also the co-principal investigator for a multi-year Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services Innovation Grant in transforming clinical practice. He started his career in the public sector working for 13 years for Orange County Behavioral Services. He is also a lecturer for the UCLA School of Public Health, an associate clinical professor of psychiatry, and the director for the transcultural psychiatry curriculum at UCI School of Medicine. Appointed by the 23rd U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, he served on the Interdepartmental Serious Mental Health Coordinating Committee from 2017 to 2020. He has obtained his medical degree from University of Minnesota, PhD in clinical psychology from Chelsea University. He has conducted multiple trainings pertaining to cultural competency, trauma, and mental health policy. I am extremely honored today that he has accepted our invitation and look forward to listening to his speech. Dr. Cho.
Thank you so much, Dr. Azab. I am intimidated by you. Actually, I've heard of you for quite some time now. And maybe if Dr. Bhuvana Rao and I do it right, maybe we can collaborate with you and recruit you to the healthcare agency. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be invited to do a brief opening for this conference. When I asked how much time do I have, and Dr. Azab and team said 15 minutes. I said, oh boy, for those of you who know me, 15 minutes will go by very quickly, and I have so much to say. But the first thing I want to say is thank you so much to Access for putting this conference together. Very timely, even if you look at the title, Peace of Mind, very, very timely. Since February of this year, I personally believe that the world has not seen trauma and crisis to this extent, at least in the last 100 years. This pandemic truly affects everyone, regardless of where you live in the world, regardless of your religious belief, regardless of your cultural makeup. Everybody has been affected by this pandemic. The trauma here is not only about the physical trauma, which we've been talking about surge after resurge in terms of the number of people who are affected, infected, as well as people who have passed away. But I think the next surge is going to come will be the issue around the mental health well-being of people all over the world because of the aftermath. Not only we've lost people physically, we lost people mentally, but we also have losses in terms of economic and finance to the extent that truly I don't believe we have seen in the last 100 years. So this is really, really a huge effect for everyone. And so it is truly timely that today we talk about the peace of mind, we talk about our emotional well-being. And honestly, I think the conversation should be around how do we encourage the approach of vulnerable community? And with this pandemic, everybody is vulnerable. Everybody all over the world is vulnerable. How do we look at each other from a whole person perspective? How do we incorporate holistic treatment that not only pay attention to the physical effect of COVID-19, but also the mental effect of COVID-19 and the financial and the economic effect of COVID-19. I'll tell you, many people ask me, why did you take this job in the middle of a pandemic? What were you thinking? And even my own therapist said, oh, what are you doing? You're doing it the wrong way. This is not the time to take the job of a healthcare agency during the pandemic. But I'll tell you what motivated me was I was watching the Board of Supervisor meeting off and on, but the week before I accept this job, there was one woman who presented her trauma. Young woman, I think she was in her early 40s, and she talked about how she and her husband put together a small restaurant, and the hope was to build that as a legacy for her young 3 daughters. But because of the pandemic, because of the stay-at-home order, because of the lockdown, their dream, their legacy, their financial backup evaporated in thin air. And she was heartbroken because she doesn't know what will become of her family and what can she leave behind for her 3 young daughter. And so that was one of the reasons why I said I have got to contribute somehow to the healing of this pandemic. And so when the opportunity prevailed itself, I said, yes, I would love to participate in this community-wide effort in battling the pandemic and in helping our community recover from this. And 4 months later, we are still in the midst of the pandemics. We have done a wonderful job. Our entire community have done a good job in lowering the infection rate in our county, but it still happens. And it's still the positivity rate, the infection rate still high in area, in zip codes, in hotspots in the community that historically have been battling with the issue of health inequity. Actually, social justice, human and health services inequity. That's what we're talking about. Because of COVID-19, it really has pushed I'm so sorry, the printer in my room is running, I apologize. The pandemic really pushed this issue of inequity to the forefront. If you look at who get affected, infected, and who have died from COVID, are vulnerable community. People who are seniors, people who live in really limited resources area in our community. Resources here coming from physical health care, mental health care, transportation, education, all of it, right? And so it gives us a better picture that this is the pandemic. We're in the middle of the pandemic. We talk about COVID, but we must talk about the other inequities that happened way in our community, happened way before the pandemic hit. And we have not been able to address the issue. And if you look at who have died from COVID-19, the majority of people who died from COVID-19 are people who either the vulnerable elderly folks who live isolated in congregate livings, people who have chronic health condition, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, etc. People who have issue of health inequity that occur way before pandemic, and we don't know how to address it. And then obviously, all of this has causes a heightened level of mental health crisis or mental health trauma in our community. How do we address this? How do we tackle this new wave of surge that I'm predicting is going to happen very, very soon, even way after we have the vaccine, because of the devastating effect this pandemic has had on our whole community, worldwide, nationwide, and particularly in Orange County. You've heard about it. You saw it on the news, but I don't think we have had a community-wide conversation on how do we do early intervention and early prevention work around this issue of mental health. And the first thing come to mind is stigma. How do we encourage people for the very first time have had mental health symptoms because of the pandemic to go and get treatment? Because in their mind, I don't have mental illness, or I don't need it, right? And so we know all those. In the beginning, the national suicide hotline has risen, but then it's kind of level off and steady now. But the warm line, the line where you call for resolutions of your anxiety or mild blue mood, not depression, because people who've never experienced this would not know how to call it. And so the warm line everywhere in the country have soared up in terms of the number of people who call in. So we know it's there, and we need to talk about stigma. Now, for the Middle East and North Africa community, historically, this region has an illustrious history of services, right? I mean, some of the first psychiatric hospital in the world came from this region. I think the one of the very first psychiatric hospital in the world was built in Baghdad in 705 CE. And then in 800 CE, one of the larger psychiatric hospitals in the world was built in Cairo. And so mental health services is not new. However, because of the stigma related to mental health condition, it is just like everywhere, we need to battle the stigma. And so I know 15 minutes gonna come up, so I wanna offer the conversation in resolution on how do we tackle this issue. And I think more than ever now, we have to engage community leaders, religious leaders, healers from the community, families, as well as youngsters in this conversation of whole person well-being, particularly the mental and emotional well-being of the community. And more important, and this kind of work, I didn't come up with it. There's a large body of literature that speaks to stigma and speak to stigma resolution for the MENA community. This is not new. I mean, the research is huge, and Dr. Azab could attest to it. There's a lot of writing about mental health stigma in the Middle East and North African community, okay? But I think another piece that some of this writing has missed is there's another segment of the community that we have to engage, and more than ever now we have to engage, and that is the policymakers, okay? Until policymakers acknowledge that they have the responsibility to create programs that are sustainable, that's the piece, sustainable program and sustainable leadership, we won't be able to tackle the issue of stigma. Okay, so we have to do that. We have to engage all segments of the community, but most importantly, we have to engage policymakers. And in our MENA community in Orange County, you have the best person to do that. That is Nala. She's so intelligent and so passionate in advocating at the policy level, and we need that. And I would say that we need to engage our youngsters, the leaders of tomorrow, to do this, right? I was at a conference yesterday, and we talk about how do we engage our family, and what do we do in order to address this issue of mental health. And everybody talk about, you got to train more mental health specialists, you got to engage people into treatment. And then at the end, it was my turn and said, that's all fine, and that's all important. But one of the most important things that we have to talk about is how do we create a new generation of leaders that pay attention to mental health and pay attention to the policy around mental health that bring about a wellness in the community, right? We no longer can separate mental health and have it sit in the periphery as a second thought and a second conversation. It has to be a total conversation as we speak about healthcare, as we speak about economy and finance and etc. So I would urge our community, the MENA community in Orange County, to really do that. It is great that you build more mental health professionals, but you have got to build more young MENA community leaders who really pay attention to this whole issue of emotional wellness as an important piece of community wellness. Okay, so to wrap it up, COVID has affected us all of us, physically, economically, socially, and emotionally. And we have to get ready for this emotional surge in crisis around COVID. That piece of trauma is going to be long lasting. We have had people who have lost their loved one to COVID. We have people who have lost their family security in terms of finance that they have tried to build for years. And now we have to talk about that. And how do we create policy that are inclusive, that are paying attention to all people, especially people who live in vulnerable area, especially people who live in area that have very, very high inequity as is related to health and human services and finance and education and criminal justice and what have you. So with that, thank you. Please learn a lot. Please have a strong conversation to move us forward together, right? We have to involve the MENA community in this conversation for the entire county community. And thank you for inviting me to talk. And as Dr. Azab said earlier, please complete the survey when you're done, because this will inform what topic we need to talk about next year. And I wish us many more years of Peace of Mind Conference to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chow, for that very moving speech. It's really nice to finally virtually meet you. I've heard about the tremendous support you've demonstrated to the conference and to this agency. We really appreciate you and your efforts. Thanks again. Before we invite the rest of our speakers for today's events, I want to run through some housekeeping guidelines with you all. Firstly, if you can't hear me or hear any of the speakers, please do send us a private message to the host, our chat moderator, Neda. Thank you so much, Neda. She will be responding to all of our participants. All participants have already been muted by default. That's to avoid any interruptions. So again, any comments, questions, relay them to the chat box. Speaking of chat box, as you know, this is a public event. We are a large group of attendees. I know that there are many families out there watching together, and we really do appreciate you joining us on your Sunday morning. That being said, if you, we want to remind you to be respectful with your mentions in the chat box. Should you have something you'd like to address and you're unsure of how others are going to respond, we kindly ask you to please send us a private message. For those who have not used Zoom before, the way that you do that is by clicking on the drop box and selecting the host who's actually named under Access Cal Peace of Mind Conference. After the speakers present, we will hold a panel Q&A discussion. Saying so, any questions you'd like us to deliver to our speakers, go ahead and also send those to the chat box. And here's the exciting part. Hope you're ready. We have a survey. We request that you fill it out at the end of this conference. Super important though, listen up carefully. The first 350 people who fill out the survey will get an electronic gift card. Now it's super important that you hear this out. The only way we can contact you is actually through an email address. So please make sure to include your email address when you're submitting that survey. And that's one survey submission and reward per email address. And if you're unable to do it electronically for whatever reason, not to worry, we can always give you a hard copy from our office. Give us a call tomorrow, we can arrange for that. And lastly, at the end of the conference, Sheikh Yasser and myself will keep the Zoom running for an additional 20 minutes. Should you have any private questions or additional resources you'd like us to offer. Okay, I hope that's the only time I have to bore you with logistics. I know that's a lot to remember, not to worry, we'll go ahead and remind you through that chat box. Now I'd like to actually welcome again Dr. Marwa, our chair. She's also one of the speakers for today's event. Dr. Azab will be discussing the issue of trauma and hardship. Dr. Marwa, the stage is yours.
If you can just allow me to share my screen, that would be lovely.
Okay, Dr. Marwa, you'll be able to share your screen right now.
Thank you. All right, so we hear a lot from the community about issues, problems, and what we try to do in these conferences is target exactly the types of questions or issues that we get. And trauma, hardships is certainly something we get a lot of questions on. And being 2020, a lot of people are going through this right now. So I want to start by saying that the past is never dead. It's not even past. So I can't move forward. Okay, here we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. So let's first of all start with a definition. What is trauma? And I got this definition from the American Psychological Association, which defines trauma as an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, rape, or natural disaster. Immediately after the event, shock and denial are typical. Longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headaches and nausea. While these feelings are normal, some people have difficulty moving on with their lives. So this is a definition I got for the American Psychological Association. This definition obviously does not really or may not really capture the diversity and applies to all communities. And that's why we do the work that we do. But I think a general definition that would probably apply to many people, including our community, is that trauma violates two of the most basic human needs. And that is the need to feel safe and the need to feel connected. So some examples that we've seen in the community are people who are refugees. And recently they've been refugees from quite a few countries, from Egypt after the oppressive regimes or leaving the oppressive regimes, from Iraq, from so many different countries, escaping the war and the war horrors, escaping oppressive regimes, escaping many things, ugly things that they faced over there. Female genital mutilation, which is a type of child abuse, and it is not condoned by any religion that I know of, which obviously can be very traumatic for the female who has to go through that. Domestic violence or any kind of violence. Also critically, people don't think of this as something that can cause trauma, but research is very clear on that, is that poor parenting, that's characteristic of things like insecure attachment, can be and has been traumatic for these children that then grow up in this world thinking it's going to replicate that, that parenting style. But not only that, but also you witnessing a person you care about going through a horrible event can actually cause traumatic symptoms in you, just as a result of your relationship with that person. The effect of that trauma on you or the person who faced the event will depend on a few things. So if you have gone through something like that, you can ask yourself, did it happen to me in a safe zone? Because when trauma happens in a place that's supposed to be safe, such as home or your home country, it's a lot more detrimental to our biology, to our psychology, to our understanding of the world than if it's done in a place that is known and agreed upon to be an unsafe place. Also ask yourself, did the person commit this to you, or the people who witnessed this happening to you, were they people that you trusted? The shorter the distance, your relation to that person, the more trustworthy that person was, and they ended up hurting you, the more detrimental the effects of the trauma are. Last but not least, and this is certainly not exhaustive, is that when you were going through the trauma, how helpless and hopeless did you feel? And one thing that comes readily to mind is that children who go through trauma, they're little, they may not have the linguistic abilities to verbalize what's going on, they may not have the muscles, the power to push people away. And whenever they think about the trauma, they're always thinking about it in the context of, I am the helpless child, even though they're thinking about it 50 years down the road. So in order to understand the effects of trauma, we must understand the stress response. Why is that? Because trauma exhausts our stress response. So let's begin with understanding what happens when something threatening or fearful happens. What happens to our system? So there's two stages happen. The first one is very fast. It's very rapid. In fact, it is so fast that it's outside your consciousness. It happens within milliseconds. And that is, something bad happens. And let's say that, the canonical example, you're in the forest and you're being, a big hairy thing is chasing you, a big bear, and it's dark, you don't have anybody to help you, and you're running away. You can decide either, am I going to fight this bear? Am I going to run away? Or sometimes people freeze. And unfortunately, and this, I've seen this too often, is some people have been frozen in that reaction for decades. So again, this system is supposed to be on, off. In fact, these chemical reactions and hormones that are released as a result of the stressor should be, if your biological program is working fine, should be washed away from your body within 90 milliseconds, within a minute and a half. And the end result of this is the adrenaline, what people might say like the adrenaline rush, which enables you to act fast, think fast, run away. All of the energy is going to your muscles so you can act. Wonderful. And then a little bit later, another stage begins called the hypothalamic pituitary axis. Don't worry about remembering that, but I know some people would want to know that. And this is a much slower phase, much more long-lasting. The end result of this is the dripping of cortisol in your body. Yes, it is cortisol that's responsible for expanding our waistline and making us look more like a pear instead of an apple. And that's a scientific term. And what happens is cortisol in the short term, in moderate amount, when you're going through the stressor, is good for you. But the problem becomes when this is long lasting. So, the typical, you're at balance here, and then something happens, you go through your fight, flight, or freeze, and then your chemistry, your hormones, your psychological, everything then goes back to baseline. Okay? And we go through this in and out every day. Our biology does this so well. In fact, it doesn't even bother to let you know, hey, I'm going to release adrenaline. Hey, should I release cortisol now? It doesn't do that. It just does it automatically for you. But the problem becomes when this system becomes exhausted, when the system becomes lengthened. So you're at balance, you go through fight or flight or freeze, but you never recover. That's problematic, because it's an exaggerated, persistent response. That can then lead us to things like post-traumatic stress disorder. What does that feel like? What is that? Well, this is when you have all of these re-experiences that are very unwelcomed and intrusive. This is when you're kind of like sitting down in class doing nothing, and then a flashback comes into your mind and you just lose all kind of like concentration abilities. When you have intrusive memories that just ruin your day and nobody knows why you're in a bad mood, neither can you really explain it verbally well, because you don't even remember the trauma that well. It's when you try to do everything you can, and instead of using your mental abilities and capacity, limited capacity, to recruit it, to succeed and propel yourself, you use it to suppress these provocative, annoying thoughts and triggers and feelings that have to do with the trauma. Also in PTSD is that you get these negative alterations in cognitions, the way you think and mood. So, you feel isolated. You can be surrounded by 100 people and feel isolated. Sometimes some people will lose interest in things they used to like before. They start to blame themselves, like, oh, well, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I'm not religious enough, and this is why this trauma happened to me. Maybe, and play the blaming game. What if? How is it? Could have, should have, done have. Are key features of the way a traumatic brain thinks. Also, you get alterations in arousal and reactivity. So you could be sitting at the dinner table, you're having a lovely dinner with your family, and then you say, can you pass me the fork? Muhammad, pass me the fork. And then Muhammad didn't hear you because, I don't know, he's a teenager and their threshold for hearing for parents is very, very high. So he doesn't answer. So you start banging on the table and say, didn't I say give me the fork? Nobody ever listened. You get glasses and you throw it, and you start being so irritable and angry because of a small incident. Think about it. If your system is pretending, because your system doesn't know you're not running away from the bear, but your system thinks that the bear exists and you're still running away. But the problem is there is no bear. The bigger problem is that you're not running away. And you have all this energy that your system now has in you, all of these hormones and all of these things, but you're sitting in your dinner table and you're not using the energy to run away. So you become extremely irritable, which obviously makes it very difficult for these people to have relationships. And it affects their performance at work. It affects their marriages, their parenting. It affects every aspect of their life. Here is the thing in my head, at least, is that I don't think of psychological trauma and what it does. I don't think it's a disorder. I think the brain is too smart for that. And it's not that the brain becomes disordered, is that the brain reorders itself in light of new information. And what's that information? The new information says that the world is unsafe, that people that should be trusted are not trustworthy, that we shouldn't trust anybody. And the more control I have, the more predictable, the safer I will be. So then the brain rewires, reorders in order to match the traumatic world that the victim believes now exists. Here is the sad news, but unfortunately, research is clear on this with pictures, with MRI, with PET scanning, that psychological trauma, emotional trauma causes brain damage, similar to traumatic brain injury, such as concussions. Serious business. So, okay, so trauma happens. What's going to happen in the brain? So what happens is that there are 3 areas that really get the worst out of it. So there are 3 areas in the brain that are extremely sensitive to stress and traumatic events. And that is the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive. This is the part that does your executive decisions. It is important for emotion regulation, for not making you impulsive, for making you be able to delay, to concentrate, to focus. The other part is this filing cabinet here, which has your long-term memories, the hippocampus. And third, and certainly very important, is the amygdala, when this is our threat system. This is like when something, it's our system that says, looks out in the world and sees, is there any threat? Is there anything I should pay attention to? Which is excellent system to protect you. Because guess what? This system gets the information within a few milliseconds, way before your conscious or your prefrontal cortex gets involved. So what happens when a trauma happens, right? Like in the brain, the brain damage includes, you'll see here that the prefrontal cortex will shrink. Not only does the prefrontal cortex shrink, remember that there were connections between your executive, decision-making, emotion regulation center, and the amygdala that's just very emotional,